welcome to Hyperspace on PSN Radio. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. We'll be opening the phone lines in hour 2. If you'd like to call in and ask a question to my guest tonight, you can do so at 786-245-8127, and please keep your question brief and on topic. And my special guest this evening is Dr. Michael Salla. And Dr. Michael Salla is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the political study of the key actors, institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. His interest in exopolitics evolved out of his investigation of the sources of international conflict and its relationship to an extraterrestrial presence that is not acknowledged to the general public, elected officials, or even senior military officials. Dr. Salla's groundbreaking Exopolitics, Political Implications of Extraterrestrial Presence in 2004 was the first published book on exopolitics and explained the political implications of extraterrestrial life. In Exposing U.S. Government Policies on Extraterrestrial Life in 2009, published, he revealed how the world's most powerful nation secretly manages information concerning extraterrestrial life and technology. In Galactic Diplomacy, Getting to Yes with ET, in 2013, he shows how humanity can negotiate with extraterrestrial civilizations in a way that protects our vital interests. In Kennedy's Last Stand, Eisenhower, UFOs, MJ-12, and JFK's assassination of 2013, he documents the tragic efforts by President Kennedy to share more widely the truth about UFOs and extraterrestrial visitation. Finally, in his most recent book, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances, in 2015, he analyzes whistleblower testimonies revealing the extent of classified space programs and extraterrestrial diplomacy. And let me get you more information here. Dr. Salla founded the Exopolitics Institute of 2005 and the Exopolitics Journal 2006. He has co-organized 5 international conferences on extraterrestrial life and Earth, transformation on the Big Island of Hawaii. Dr. Salla is the host of ExoNews.tv and has appeared in hundreds of radio and television shows and international conferences for his research on exopolitics and international conflict. And his website is exopolitics.org. And please welcome the Dr. Salla to the show this evening. And aloha and welcome. Hello there.
Aloha, Solaris. Thank you for having me on the show.
And thank you, Michael. Should I call you Michael or Dr. Salla? How would you like to be addressed tonight?
Michael's fine.
Okay, it's great to meet you. What an honor it is. And of course, you're on a beautiful, beautiful island over there with, I'm sure, so much extraterrestrial energies surfacing and surrounding you to some degree, I would imagine.
I'm sure I'm here for some reason like that, but they haven't shown themselves to me yet.
Okay, it's supposed to be a hotspot over there, just saying. You're probably familiar with that, but I've heard that there's a lot of celestial activities over there on and off, a lot of contactees. And I wanted to roll my sleeves up with you about contactees, and I know with all your expertise with abductees and contactees and military abductions, how popular is this? And has the abduction experience increased over the past 10 years, would you say?
I think the abduction experience seems to have peaked. There seems to be more kind of genuine contact experiences, if we can make that distinction between the kind of involuntary abductions and the kind of more voluntary contact experiences. There seems to be more people coming forward these days saying that their contacts are kind of voluntary and much more uplifting and transformative, as opposed to the older abduction, kind of the more kind of harrowing or frightening experiences involving abductions.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's nice to know that it's more peaceful these days, because I do know that a lot of people have had not so positive events. And I wonder if that's correlated with perhaps military abductions and some of the maybe psychotronic programs they've run that are more devious, would you say?
Well, you know, the military abductions is definitely a part of the equation. They have been doing that for some time now to kind of monitor what's been happening to people that have been abducted. And, of course, both the involuntary and the voluntary cases, the military is very interested. But I think they're particularly interested in the abductions where there's some kind of genetic program going on. So they kind of re-abduct these people and try and tinker with their genetics. Whereas with the contactees, the people who are really liaising with kind of more positive extraterrestrials, from my kind of research and my contacts, these people seem to be more monitored.
Mm-hmm. Right. And can you elaborate a little bit on the genetic programming or the genetic program in general? What exactly does that entail?
Well, it's people being taken up and extraterrestrials working on them genetically, and this has been happening since that person's youth. So, and it also often involves their parents. And it seems that the genetic tinkering is designed to enhance the people in some way. So the abductees have heightened abilities in some respect, whether it's heightened psychic abilities, more of an ability to be able to kind of like emote what others are feeling. There seems to be some kind of enhancement that way. Whereas the military seem to be, with their abductions, the military abductions, they're more interested in kind of developing super soldiers.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's more of a weaponization of their spiritual gifts or their extraterrestrial gifts, wouldn't you say, to some degree, with the
Definitely.
military? Yeah.
With the military, yeah, they're definitely interested in having enhanced humans that they can use for military applications. Whereas I think for the ETs doing the abductions, they have some other agenda. It's not necessarily an evil one. It's not necessarily a good one. It's an agenda, I think, that's tied up with their own kind of long-term survival.
That makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting when you look at the contactees or abductees. I wonder if there's a correlation between early genetic alien experimentation and the contactees alive today. In other words, our great ancestors or whoever occupied the map before we even showed up here as a quote unquote civilization. I'm wondering how far back this really goes. If it's in our cells and our atoms in a lineage in some way where they've actually been doing this for a very long time.
I think they have. From my research, it looks like there have been as many as 22 different ET races that, over the course of millennia, have been interfering or tinkering with our genetics. And some of that is just through kind of hybridization, as a result of people having alien genetics kind of inserted into them through genetics. Other cases, it's interbreeding, and we actually see records of that in some ancient cultures, like the Sumerian culture, the Egyptian culture, the Vedic culture, where they talk about the gods intermarrying with humans, and even the Old Testament talks about that in the Book of Genesis, where the Nephilim took the daughters of men and basically interbred with them. So I think this goes back many thousands of years, and we have very different extraterrestrial groups that are involved, basically intersplicing their genetics with ours. And I think the reason has something to do with the fact that in order for a soul that's embodied in an extraterrestrial body, for that to be able to incarnate successfully in a human body, there needs to be some of the original DNA involved in there, which is a really interesting issue. But I think that's part of this.
That's fascinating. So does that mean that the ET itself doesn't contain a soul, or is it the opposite of that?
It's more the opposite, that the ETs themselves, they are embodied, soul embodied, and so basically they're looking either in the case of the Greys, they're looking for some kind of hybrid that would be a useful receptacle or suitable vehicle for them to be able to transmigrate their soul or move their soul technologically to that body. I think they have the technology to do that. For other ET groups, I think it's so that they can incarnate amongst us and to be able to influence us through our own culture by being one of us. And the more that they can have their genetics in our kind of genome, the more we are able to kind of embody or express the kind of abilities that they have.
That makes a lot of sense. It's almost like they transfer their consciousness into a quote, I don't want to call it a host, but another a different type of vessel to some degree. Can you elaborate on the 22 different types of ET races a little bit? I'm just kind of curious insofar as what you've come across.
Sure. Well, there are the ones that most people are very familiar with, like the Sumerians that Sitchin talked about at length in his books. Then you have other races that are mentioned in different cultures. I can list off a number of them, like the Syrians, the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians. We have races such as the Umites that have also been involved at some level, Talsetians, Procyon, reptilians, of course. The Greys have also been a part of the equation. So in my book, Galactic Diplomacy, I basically go through each of them. Like I named 19 of them that are the ones that I felt had the most kind of evidence. Most people were able to talk about the 19 races that were in that book that had been kind of genetically intermixing with us.
That's really, really fascinating to me. Well, to me, it seems like once our DNA becomes activated through frequency and higher consciousness, we're able to access this, what I call multiple world realities, which would make sense that we would be able to access perhaps our quote unquote, what I call our celestial heritage. And to me, just looking at what you're describing with these different types of species and races, I suspect they're all part of our galactic neighborhood and family to some degree.
Well, that's right. Yes, I think they are genetically and in terms of like souls embodied on the earth. I think there are many millions of them embodied on the earth. Both from all different races, whether we're talking about Pleiadians or Sirians, Alpha Centaurians that have incarnated on the earth, as well as reptilians and some of the insectoid races. So when people talk about star seeds, I think we have different types of star seeds. Those from the kind of more benevolent or service to other groups, and those from the more kind of aggressive or more self-interested groups.
That makes sense. Do you see a galactic war, or is it just something that's happening on this quote unquote timeline? Do you see this that there's conflict? Seems like there's this control mechanism that's here to control, manipulate, quote unquote, maybe even brainwave activity, a sort of mind control screen program. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, I think it's been going on for a long time. I think these galactic wars, they're even part of our ancient history. If you go back millions of years, there with the kind of first civilizations that had to go underground to survive the kind of surface wars. In a way, these were kind of manifestations of galactic wars, where different galactic civilizations took side. We know about Atlantis and Lemuria, but there were civilizations even much older than that, going back nearly as much as 20 million years, which is quite a long time. And many of those civilizations that at one point inhabited the Earth and developed advanced societies and technologies, I mean, they had to escape underground in order to escape these wars. And some of them continue today. Like the one that I think that I'm kind of like more familiar with is the Mayan civilization. That they actually, the Mayans didn't disappear. I mean, they did disappear from the kind of Central America, but they went through some kind of shift in consciousness and technological change in their society, where they simply went off planet and took millions of them with them off planet, and now they exist off planet, and they are a galactic culture. But it's also part of kind of wider galactic war, this galactic conflict, which has been going on for millennia.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, what comes to mind is phase shifting. When people change their molecular structure through frequency and modulation and higher consciousness, it seems to me like we can morph our design, our bodies, and what I call light body into quote-unquote Merkaba, but go to another dimensional space and consciousness. As a collective, perhaps they were doing that through raised consciousness and altering their DNA and molecular structure. What's your take on that?
I think they did something like that. I think that they found out the key to be able to transform the body and develop high technology in terms of sacred geometry. And they were able to do that. Things like the Merkaba, as you were saying, not only is that very important in terms of being able to develop advanced technologies, but also in terms of being able to evolve the light body. And so, the Mayans, I believe that they discovered this, and so as a civilization, they were able to evolve to a level that we have yet to attain. So, and there are other civilizations like that.
I agree with you. It's interesting because I do believe we have the potential as a race to ascend to that level of consciousness, but it seems to me like there's a frequency fence happening where there's interference, almost like a design work with a holographic interference pattern. To me, I see a lot of mind control happening here, and perhaps that has something to do with the Nazis of World War II. I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, yes, there's been a lot of mind control, a lot of interference by some of the groups that really have not not been wanting this kind of evolution to happen. I think the groups that stand most to lose from this kind of evolution are the elites, the people, the members of the secret societies. Because in many ways, these are people who practice black magic or practice the ability to kind of like mentally entrain people to kind of believe in certain things. So I think that these kind of black magicians, the members of these secret societies, they're able to kind of like suck off the energy of the masses. And so if the masses were able to liberate themselves, well, then, the secret societies would lose an important part of their kind of energy. So I think that when we're talking about a kind of glass ceiling, a frequency fence, I think the secret societies that have been running our planet for millennia now, I mean, they want us to evolve to a certain degree in order to be able to develop technology, a sophisticated technology that they can then kind of hijack for their own purposes, such as, say, galactic conquest, or to be able to enter into the galactic wars on one side or the other. But on the other hand, they want to kind of keep us kind of subjected in this kind of place where we don't evolve consciously into this kind of higher mental states like the Mayans did, where we suddenly understand sacred geometry and are able to develop our light bodies so that we can start at an individual level to be able to develop these higher abilities such as transportation, phase shifting, as you said. They don't want us to do this. So, yeah, the elites definitely have a game plan and they're sticking to it.
Yeah, it's interesting because from where I come from, and I taught a lot of Ascension work. I'm sure you're familiar with that and DNA activation. It's our belief system and it's our practice that we ascend to higher levels of consciousness. We acquire our quote unquote avatar abilities, and that nothing really stops us. Although even though they'll try to use mechanisms, devices, implants, or interference programs and patterns, we still have a universal law and right to ascend. So I'm wondering if there's some point in the continuum where these people will fall away and stop, trying to control and manipulate us, because I believe it's our celestial heritage and birthright to ascend and step up into the galactic neighborhood.
Well, you're exactly right. Yes, it is our birthright, and it's really ultimately a choice. It's a choice to break free of the kind of mind control system that has been asserted collectively over us. And I think that there are many millions on the planet who are ready to break free. As you said, you've been involved in this for some time, and I bet there are many others that you've helped and who are ready for this. As there are, the millions of star seeds that have incarnated on the planet, but the kind of great mass of humanity are still trapped or still not ready for this information. Whether it's simply because they're younger, kind of more immature souls, or whether it's because the mind control is so extensive and has been so successful. I mean, we've got to kind of, and I'm sure you've been through this, as I have, as many others. We have these glass ceilings in terms of like the ability to be able to move into more abundance or move into more successful modes of thinking, that through successive generations or incarnations where, if we developed any higher ability, we were kind of like martyred or attacked or had terrible things done to us. We live in this time, in this age, where those kind of memories are still with us. So if you or I or anyone listening to this were to suddenly start spontaneously teleporting or doing things like that, there's a kind of belief system in our unconscious which would kind of like almost kind of lead to us punishing ourselves for that ability or stopping us from doing that. It's very frightening. So we have to break through that.
I agree. And then there's national security. So you think about it, when people start to develop certain abilities, whether it's telepathy or whatever, it would seem to me like they would be very interested in those quote unquote beings who are capable of ascending to higher levels and would want to monitor, control, track, maybe even run interference against them being able to go to the next level.
Exactly right. One of my favorite movies in that regard is Jumpers. You probably have watched it. Yeah, it's a very good movie. It describes exactly that. Anyone that suddenly develops this ability to instantly teleport, there's a kind of shadow agency who can monitor the kind of the energy that's produced through that ability, and basically they run interference, and in the movie it depicts these people being kind of systematically eliminated, and I think that movie is very accurate. This has been going on for a long, long time. Anyone developing those high consciousness abilities, there are entities that basically monitor this and try to basically run interference and eliminate people that are doing that. So yeah, people have to be very careful if they do start displaying these kinds of abilities, because I think you can do it in the safety of the Himalayas, where it's still very remote, and there's only a few people that exhibit those kinds of abilities, but you're in out of the way places. But if you start developing those kinds of abilities in the midst of societies, then you need to be very, very careful.
I so agree with you on that one. Yeah, it's interesting because when I think of transhumanism, it seems to me like what they're trying to do is take the light body and insert it into an artificial intelligence program to create their own version of immortality, when in fact we can acquire this through our own spiritual lifestyles. What's your take on the transhumanism? Because it seems like it parallels into that to some degree.
Well, yeah, that's right. It's really, I think this is the way in which people that are running these military programs, or the secret societies that want to basically monopolize power and control, they want to hijack human abilities, and the way to do that is to kind of get people to buy into a new belief system. And the new belief system is that, okay, through a technologically enhanced body, you can have these superior abilities. Now, you and I know that that's nonsense, that you don't need technology to do that. But, if you can get people at a collective level to buy into this belief system that some kind of, bioengineered limbs or implants or whatever technology you put into a person, that's going to give you these kinds of advanced abilities, then people are going to buy into that, and of course the powers that be, the secret societies and so forth, now have successfully implanted a new belief system that they can kind of like manipulate humanity for generations to come.
Yeah, I agree. It reminds me of a soul trap to some degree, because when you're going into these, what I call artificial intelligence interface, it seems to me like it's taking away so much of the natural soul and the spirit. It's very concerning to me because I see people going into this direction, and although free will is honored, I still like to be in alignment with the multiversal flow. I don't like the idea of having implants, mechanisms, or devices to control and manipulate. And I'd like to ask you, how many species out there use mechanisms such as implants, alien implants, or anything that's technological to that degree? Do you know offhand?
Well, I know that the races that have been most heavily involved in implanting humans in order to kind of like limit their abilities in some way, the Greys, the Reptilians, the Draconians, the different insectoid species, the praying mantis, that these have all been involved in kind of various genetic experimentations, implanting people with all kinds of technologies. So I think that those races have been kind of laying the foundations for transhumanism.
That makes sense. Well, how many of those races do you think have been reverse engineered in our secret space program that are not really legitimate extraterrestrial types, but maybe a reverse engineered species?
Well, I know Stephen Greer talks a lot about the kind of grey beings. He calls them programmed life forms, the ones that are typically involved in abductions. And I think he's probably correct that that the military has been successful in reverse engineering or cloning some of these races. I think in particular the greys. But I don't think those are the ones that are responsible for the abduction phenomenon. I think that the ones that are being cloned for the secret space programs, they have special uses for them. Whether it's kind of piloting spacecraft or performing kind of technical jobs or whatever it is. But I think that it's really that, and of course they have successfully cloned humans. So there is cloning in terms of soldiers, in terms of leaders, elite leaders, that they want to have multiple clones of leaders that they want to be able to manipulate or replace at any time. There are stories of kind of cloned Nordic extraterrestrials. But I don't think the kind of secret space programs have been involved in that. That might be more the kind of the greys, the taller greys, and the reptilians that are involved in that kind of more advanced genetic cloning.
That makes sense. When you talk about the quote unquote symbiotic craft, does that mean you're piloting a spacecraft through consciousness alone? And does our secret space program use this already? I'm pretty sure they do, but I just want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, that's a very important part of the whole kind of question surrounding how to use these advanced technologies. And it was something that the Nazis were very heavily involved in. That kind of mind technology interface that needed to be there at some level to be able to use these technologies. That when the Nazi research of ancient cultures took place, and even predating them, the German secret societies that were also involved in that. They discovered that the ancient human civilizations, Atlantis, Hyperborea, Lemuria, and so forth, that these civilizations had all successfully been able to kind of use technology with enhanced mental abilities, so that there was that kind of mind technology interface, and so they tried to replicate that. And I think that this took the Nazis some time to achieve that, but eventually, like any technical problem, eventually you come up with a solution. But certainly, they would have appreciated the fact that certain grey or certain extraterrestrial races, such as the Greys, that are kind of really synthetic life forms anyway, that they can be more easily cloned and reproduced for the purpose of being able to pilot ships, or used in that kind of technology mind interface. So they're kind of specifically built for that, and so they're ideal for that. But I think that the secret space programs have been definitely trying to train succeeding generations of humans to be able to better do that themselves.
I agree. Well, to me, it seems like it's all about mastering consciousness in one form or another. And it really doesn't matter if you're interfaced or not. But what's interesting to me is I know that they have artificial telepathy, what we call synthetic telepathy, and the military's use this and has contracts with it. I'm wondering to what degree they've really interfaced that into the quote-unquote mind technology interface. It sounds like that's something that would be that they would use to some degree. What's your impression of that?
Oh, it's very interesting. Charles Hall, he was the first person that I came across that talked about this synthetic technology or this synthetic telepathy, just basically electronic forms of telepathy that he experienced back in the early 1960s at Nellis Air Force Base. And so this was something that the Air Force was learning. And of course, then you have the DARPA being able to kind of reproduce that. So I think that they do have this kind of electronic form of telepathy that they can use to kind of like interface with people, kind of so-called mind of God technologies, where all of a sudden you start hearing a voice in the head telling you that that they're this angel or something, and you're their appointed prophet or something, and they just kind of manipulate you down that merry track.
Exactly. Seems like it would be the ultimate mind control program, if you ask me. And then you add on something like psychotronic hardware, and then you've got a target or somebody who's being programmed. But I find it very interesting, that whole technology, and I have a history behind it. That's why I asked. But very, very fascinating in general. But I believe that we are all naturally telepathic to begin with, and it seems to me like they just like to hijack once again our natural abilities and then use them as a template, on the brainwave level to interface with an artificial intelligence. And my question to you is what is your take on the AI that they talk about? Now, some people will reference an artificial intelligence associated with the etheric realm, and other people talk about one that's just a quantum computer in the secret space program. What is your impression of that?
Well, the AI is a really interesting one, interesting question. I first came across it when I was reading the literature about the extraterrestrial contact case in Italy called the Amicizia, or the friendship case, from basically 1956 to 1978. A group of extraterrestrials, kind of human-looking extraterrestrials, were having contact with senior people in the Italian government and other NATO countries. And so that over a 22-year, they were kind of very prominent in exposing themselves to these people. But they were saying that their enemy was a synthetic life form, basically an AI that had hunted them across the galaxy, and that they were engaged in this military conflict with this AI life form. And that was very interesting because they basically said that what happened was that in 1978, their bases in the Adriatic were destroyed by these AI life forms. Um, and and so then you have the kind of material from Corey Good, who also talks about the AI that the secret space programs are guarding against, because this is a phenomenon that has happened again and again. You have humans developing AI technologies, and then the AI is successfully implanted into a kind of synthetic life form, or a body that kind of looks human enough, but really isn't. It's an AI being. It's not soul embodied. It's artificial intelligence, and then that kind of leads to this kind of new phase in galactic war, where it's humans or organic life forms against synthetic life forms.
Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense to me. That's quite fascinating. And I remember hearing you in an interview not too long ago. You were talking about the I guess it was a saucer that had crashed back in Italy in 1933. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, that's really the first kind of documented UFO crash that we know of. And that was something that the Italian government was involved in. Benito Mussolini was the prime minister of Italy at the time, and he basically classified that technology that was recovered above top secret, and the Italians began to do their own kind of studies. Guglielmo Marconi, the famous kind of inventor of the radio waves, or one of the two inventors of the radio waves, he was involved in that Italian study. And at some point, the Italians began to share that information with the Germans, who were also involved in that kind of flying saucer technology as well. So basically, this was like 14 years before Roswell. So Roswell is definitely not the start of the kind of UFO age. Italy, in terms of crash retrievals, the first one was Italy in 33.
That's fascinating to me. Nobody ever talks about that. I don't hear them anyway. I think this is quite interesting. Were there any occupants?
There's not too much known about actually any occupants of the craft. What is known from the documents that were released publicly was just the shape of the craft, a kind of your traditional flying saucer craft around, I think it was somewhere in the range of 50 feet. That was recovered. So there was some kind of a crash, and whoever was piloting the craft, according to the documents, they must have just gotten away. But the vehicle itself was retrieved. So, and that's when the Italians and then the Germans really got heavily involved into the whole kind of reverse engineering of these flying saucers.
Okay,
But but for the Germans, I would.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, for the Germans, it really began before that. The German secret societies that began in the early 1920s with the Brill Society, where you had the German psychics, Maria Orsic, Sigrun, and the others that were part of the Brill Society, that they were in communication with some different ET races and inner Earth civilizations, and they got the instructions for building a flying saucer device, or a teleportation device, however you want to describe it. And so the Germans began to work on that in the 1920s into the early 1930s. And then when Hitler came to power in 1933, he suddenly discovered that, eventually he discovered that these German secret societies were heavily involved in this kind of development of advanced technologies, which required enhanced mental abilities. And of course, Hitler actually was heavily involved in secret societies himself. The Thule Society actually was it was the organization that actually established the German Workers' Party, which was the forerunner to the Nazi Party. So Hitler basically just, as in his position as head of Nazi Germany, provided the German secret societies the financial resources and the scientific know-how to be able to move forward in their reverse engineering.
Mm-hmm. It's so fascinating to me. So it sounds like the Nazis were way ahead of the game insofar as reverse engineered craft. Now, my question to you is when all of these, during the war, they had all these sightings, were a lot of these sightings associated or affiliated with Hitler's reverse engineered craft versus an off-world, legitimate UFO?
It's a bit of both.
Okay.
The thing is, we've had many different ET civilizations, and also, Earth civilizations with flying saucers and those kinds of technologies that are able to kind of view us. Now, the thing to keep in mind here with Germany and the secret space programs was that Germany had two secret space programs. The first secret space program was run by the secret societies, and Hitler and Nazi SS didn't have full control, and it's actually questionable how much control they had over the secret societies. In many ways, Hitler was a puppet. He was basically put in position by the German secret societies as a Führer. And even though he seemed to have kind of absolute power, when it came to these secret space programs, he didn't have power. But he did have the Nazi SS run a separate program, a parallel program to the secret societies program. And that Nazi program wasn't as sophisticated. It certainly didn't have as much in the terms of the kind of fully developed flying saucer technologies that the secret societies had developed in Germany. But they had enough that they felt that they could deploy these in times for the war effort. But the German secret societies, even before World War II broke out in September of 1939, the German secret societies had already begun relocating to South America and to Antarctica, because they saw that eventually Germany would be embroiled in a massive world war, and that Europe would not be a good place to be doing this kind of advanced engineering of new fleets of flying saucers.
Mm-hmm. And which program did the U.S. inherit after the war? Was it the SS program, or was it the other one from the secret societies for the secret space program?
They largely inherited the Nazi SS program. I mean,
Okay.
all of the Operation Paperclip scientists, they were brought over, and they were involved in the Nazi SS programs because they were there in Europe. The Germans who had relocated to Antarctica and South America, none of them were relocated. These were the ones that had the most advanced technologies. So they were working in Antarctica, and of course, people know about Operation High Jump under Admiral Byrd, and that expedition, that naval expedition, was thoroughly defeated, comprehensively defeated, basically by Nazi flying saucers. Those sources were a kind of a collaboration between the German secret societies and the Nazi SS, who had been able to secretly go to Antarctica before the war ended, before they were captured. But certainly, yes, what was in the United States was the kind of lesser developed of the two Nazi secret space programs.
That's fascinating. Well, didn't they used to was it Antarctica was called the New Berlin?
Yeah, there was a part of Antarctica which is now called Queen Maud Land, that during this, when the Germans established their bases there, it was called New Swabia or New Schwabenland. But definitely that was a land, an area where the Germans were able to find um, bases underground that they were able to successfully expand and move many hundreds of thousands of people in there. And some estimates go as high as 7 million, which is quite an extraordinary number. But it's possible anywhere between 7 million to several hundred thousand people relocated to Antarctica to build the German flying saucer fleets.
That's fascinating. So what do you think happened to these people? Obviously, they're still not there, or have they decided to go off planet and go elsewhere to another planet?
Well, I think the German elites or the Aryans that went there, they basically developed these technologies because they were more interested in kind of galactic conquest. I think that they, it goes back to Maria Orsic and the whole Vril Society. They were very interested in meeting the beings from Aldebaran and basically reconnecting with them because when they in the communications it became clear that they had a lot in common. The Aldebarans, in terms of being a kind of Aryan civilization, they had a lot in common with the German secret societies. So they definitely wanted to kind of go out there and establish diplomatic relations with these Aldebarans. And the important thing is that the German secret societies, they were not so much interested in planetary conquest, which sounds strange because, of course, there was a world war and the Nazis were clearly involved in attempting to establish planetary conquest. But this is the big difference, which a lot of people miss, is that the German secret societies, they had more in common with the kind of occult societies in other nations than they did with the kind of SS, the Nazi SS, who had this kind of very rigid kind of racial philosophy. The secret societies understood that really power comes from your mind, your ability to be able to harness consciousness, not so much racial purity. Even though that's a part of the equation, it's really all about being able to use higher consciousness. So so this was something that they understood. So they were not interested so much in planetary conquest, but more just establishing a presence out in the stars, and eventually asserting their kind of destiny in the galaxy, if you like.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like to me, I mean, that sounds like a beautiful utopia. I mean, to me, on an ascension level, it sounds like just wanting to merge with higher levels of consciousness and what I call our galactic neighborhood. Once again, it's interesting. So somewhere along the way, some of the secret societies became contaminated, or did they? Or is it just something else that's taking on the form of a secret society? And what we see today seems like a lot of twisted and mangled, maybe, as you were saying, dark rituals associated. There's a contamination factor now.
Well, that's right. There was a kind of contamination or infiltration. Your secret societies. People often assume that secret societies are evil, elite-run organizations out to manipulate and control humanity. I mean, that's not true. Secret societies, by virtue of being secret societies, do it because kind of exoteric religions and power structures basically want to eliminate this kind of hidden knowledge. So all the secret societies begin with very positive efforts to try and harness higher consciousness. But then the kind of the elites, or say we call them the Satanists, the Luciferians, whatever, the black magicians, then they will go in and infiltrate those secret societies. So whether you're talking about the Rosicrucians or the Freemasons and many other secret societies, by and large, these organizations all began with very positive goals, but they get subverted. And the same thing happened with the Vril Society, the Thule Society that established Germany's secret space program. These were beings that really had kind of like aspirations to join the galaxy, to join the greater brotherhood or sisterhood of the stars. And so that's where they kind of put their energies. But there was a certain degree of infiltration, a certain degree of subversion of that. So the whole thing started to kind of like twist and turn. But it's a power play all the time, because the thing is that the way in which the kind of black magicians operate is that these are beings who themselves do not have great creative ability. They have the ability to subvert and control and manipulate, but they're not very good creators, because to be a really good creator, you need to be in connection with your soul consciousness, with higher consciousness, with the galactic Godhead, if you like, whatever name you give it. So the way in which the black magicians operate is to always subvert, always hijack, always manipulate those who do have this ability to be able to tap into higher consciousness and to be able to manufacture incredible things, and then use that for their own purposes.
They certainly do. It seems like they've done that all along, with even with patents and things like that, with 0-point energy and things like that. I could elaborate on. It's such a disservice to everyone on the planet when you think about the control mechanisms involved in the deception. But interesting. I was going to ask you also about the correlation of if there is a correlation with the moon and Antarctica and the advanced technology. Are they going back and forth, or did they go back and forth to the dark side of the moon, or have they connections over there?
Well, the moon, obviously, for any society which is developing a space program, it's the logical place to go first. It's the logical place in terms of being able to test your equipment, to be able to develop a staging post to go further afield, like other planets, Mars, and so forth. And this is what happened with the Germans. But what occurred with the German secret space program was that, because they were operating in cooperation with one of the groups of extraterrestrials. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the Vril Society and Maria Orsic, they were working with this kind of Nordic group from Aldebaran, but then you had the Nazi SS kind of coming in, and Hitler, and they began to collaborate more with the reptilians. And so the reptilians had bases on the moon. So after the war, as the Nazi SS gradually infiltrated more and more and took over more and more of the kind of the secret, the German Secret Society space program, it was more co-opted. And so at some point, the reptilians allowed the Nazis to establish bases on the moon, in locations that the reptilians had control over, and then that was a staging post to go elsewhere. But the important thing to keep in mind about the moon is that the moon is very heavily colonized by different extraterrestrial groups and space programs going back hundreds of thousands of years. So when the Germans showed up first, they needed to make an alliance or establish diplomatic relations with one of the races that were there. It wasn't a question of just showing up and saying, okay, I claim this bit of land in the name of kind of new Germany or New Berlin. You couldn't do that. It was like you could only go up there. You had to form an alliance with one of the ET groups, and they would give you kind of protection and give you access to a place where you could build a base. And so for the Nazi SS, they basically had protection from the reptilians. Now, the interesting thing is, and this gets to one of the articles, actually my most recent article on my website, exopolitics.org, is that the U.S. Navy attempted to establish a military presence on the moon. That in the 1960s and the 1970s, they had a program, and the program was called NOVA, N-O-V-A, and they wanted to establish multiple bases on the moon and have basically 10,000 Navy personnel on the moon. So these were going to be military bases on the moon, but the Navy was stopped. Now, this is what the Apollo program was all about. That the Apollo program was really run by the Navy, and what we know of the Apollo program, of Apollo, the Apollo moon missions, Apollo 11 to Apollo 17. That these were all landings. We're told that it was all about, getting these astronauts up there. They'd look around for a little bit, bring some rocks back, and that was it. But that was really the first stage of an ambitious program to colonize the moon. But the problem was that the Navy had not established diplomatic relations with any of the moon races or any of the extraterrestrial races that had a presence on the moon. So when the Navy showed up using NASA and the Apollo program as a surrogate to be able to establish a naval presence on the moon, basically they were kicked off the moon. They were warned off the moon. that's why the Navy had to basically back off and end the Apollo program. And then, of course, the Navy was faced with the dilemma that, well, we can't establish a base on the moon, so what we have to do is collaborate more with one of the existing civilizations, or with the Germans, who have established the presence up there themselves. And so that's what they did.
That's fascinating. So it sounds like the Germans are still there with other groups, other species?
The Germans are up there now. They are now part of what Corey Good refers to as the Dark Fleet, which is a kind of a hexagonal design base on the far side of the moon, and that's really the kind of main base from which the German secret societies now have a presence with the reptilians. But the thing with the German secret societies and the Nazi SS was that they were successful in infiltrating the U.S. military-industrial complex. So in a way, Jim Mars is right. That we live in the Fourth Reich. Mm-hmm. It's just being done covertly. And there's a really fascinating book which is called. The name escapes me for the moment, but basically it's based on something called the Red House document, and it's in 1944 in August, when the Germans realized that the West were going to win the war, that the cause was lost. Martin Bormann, the leader of the deputy leader, he basically ran the Nazi Germany on behalf of Hitler. He got the top industrialists and bankers to meet in Strasbourg, France, and basically gave them the go-ahead to start relocating all of their economic resources to friendly countries and begin to invest in corporations which they can then exercise influence and control over, so that after the war, after the military defeat of Nazi Germany, Nazi Germany can rise as an economic power behind the scenes. So the Nazi regime was kind of like the phoenix, but it wouldn't be a military victory that they would achieve; it would be economic victory. And that I think is exactly what happened. That we do have in the United States with the military-industrial complex. We had all of these major corporations that have been infiltrated by the Nazi SS and the secret societies, basically established a Fourth Reich in the United States, and certainly in Europe. The European Union is controlled by Germany.
That's really interesting. You say that, and you see what's going on across the board on the timeline. It sure looks like the Fourth Reich to me. It doesn't even seem discrete anymore. It seems like there's a real dark tide coming forward. I was going to ask you really quickly, being on the moon, in my opinion, would change the biomolecular structure and perhaps appearance of someone who's quote-unquote on the planet here. Would it change their psyche and consciousness? I would suspect they would completely shapeshift to a level that they might even look extraterrestrial after a while. People who get bilocated up there or transfer up there from German. Can you hear me?
Right. From what I know, in terms of, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. I just want to make sure. I thought I broke up for a second. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yes. All right. So basically, from what I know, the two main bases up on the moon where humans go are either the Dark Fleet base or Command, but both are kind of like halfway stations, if you like, to other things. Typically, I know as far as lunar operations is concerned, that's a very major facility that used to be a Nazi facility, but after agreements were reached between the secret space programs and the kind of the Nazi space programs, lunar operations.
What's going on? You're cutting out, Michael. Can you hear me? Oh, we lost him. Hang on for a second, everybody. We're getting him right back. That's what happens when we talk about the moon and Nazi bases on the moon. My goodness, we'll get him back here. That signal was getting disrupted. You're listening to Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and we're trying to get Dr. Michael Salla back with us tonight. Hang on, everybody.
hopefully we can get him back on. He's kind
Yeah.
of he was cutting in and out there, and I was trying to see if I could reset him, and then we ended up losing him anyway. So
Well, yeah, I suspect you might want to hang up and try one more time. I wonder if they're just trying to disrupt the signal or something. Interesting, because it was really interesting information he was talking about there with the Dark Fleet. Hello.
Hi, I think we cut off there.
You did. You were getting so much interference, and then we just lost you. So if you can kind of backtrack a little bit to, we were talking about the Dark Fleets, and can you reconnect that back to us here? What I was talking about with the moon?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. There's two main bases up there that I know that humans go to. The Dark Fleet base and Lunar Operations Command, but both are kind of halfway stations. Both are places where people go, or secret space program personnel go. Whether it's to kind of like be indoctrinated, to be kind of acclimated to off-world operations, and then they're sent off to do things, whether it's on other planets or in the asteroid belt, or even kind of like outside of our solar system. So I don't know of people that have been spending extended periods of time on the moon. So, as to your question of whether genetically they change, I don't know about that. But certainly, as far as Mars is concerned, I mean, there are people that have that are born on Mars. That Mars is now has a kind of has multi-generational colonies. Certainly, yeah, we can say that genetics there are very different because the gravity is different.
Mm-hmm. What's really amazing is we still have NASA pictures that indicate nobody's there, right? But we have all these multi-generational societies or races there. So what do you think's happening, and why is there so much deception still with the NASA and all of the airbrushed, quote-unquote, pictures that come in?
Well, I think this is the way in which the secret societies like to operate. They operate through deception. They operate through kind of like manipulating societies, manipulating great numbers of people. So basically keeping kind of...
Oh, where'd he go? Are you there? You're breaking up again, I guess. Hang on. I don't see the signal drop. You're breaking up, Michael. Hang on, everybody.
okay, we had a call drop, and so now we'll try to reestablish contact because it said call drop.
Well, thank you. We'll get him back. That's interesting, huh?
Yeah, he was really clear there, and then it was like he just evaporated.
I'm telling you. Do you have him on Skype or the house number?
No, this is the Skype.
Okay. Guess we can try again. Goodness. Yep.
He could be having trouble with his Skype. His Skype could be fluctuating.
Yeah, he's over on the island there. Technically, I don't think that would have been a problem. Who knows? Hello again. Hi. Sorry about those signal drops. Don't know what's going on.
Yes. Seems that we're getting quite a lot of interference at the moment.
I'm telling you. Well, we were talking about Mars and NASA. Maybe that's why, huh?
Yeah. Well, definitely. There's some really interesting information about what's really going on Mars, and So Mars is a place where they have a lot of colonies that have been secretly established. This is all done without the majority of the population knowing, and I think it's because the elites that run our planet, want to be able to kind of like manipulate the mass consciousness to utilize all of the economic resources, the human genetic resources, and to use them in whatever way they want. Because these people that are kind of running the show behind the scenes, they do want to escape any kind of oversight, any kind of transparency, any kind of accountability. So doing it all secretly is their way of being able to just kind of do what they want without interference.
Yeah, that's almost unfortunate. It almost seems to me like there's an expendable level here on this planet, an illusion of. I mean, it seems like people here are getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop to some degree, because it would be nice to go to another planet and live and travel the way the covert space program does, or the whatever you want to call them, secret space program. Is it just for a select group?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely for a select group, because I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that this select group understands the power of collective consciousness. They understand the power of being able to manipulate large numbers of people into expressing certain emotional states. Corey Good refers to this as loosh energy. So loosh energy, I don't know if you've heard of that term,
I
but
have.
basically it's kind of like this kind of negative psychic energy that large numbers of people exhibit. So, for example, you go to a football game, that kind of hyper aggressive energy where, you have different, you know, two different teams and kind of really getting into this mode, this highly emotional, forensic state. That's an example of loosh energy. Wars are an example of loosh energy. When you have kind of like nations at loggerheads with one another, where collectively you get great masses of people hating or projecting their fears or whatever it is on the other side. This is all energy that can be harnessed by races that thrive on that kind of thing, and this is something that we kind of misunderstand. In a way, like we have sheep, like the way sheep are treated. Now sheep, of course, can be killed and eaten, and that's one way of manipulating sheep. Another way of manipulating sheep is to feed them well and to just shear them, so you have the wool, and you have that resource, and you make things from it. So similarly with humanity at a collective level, we are a resource both in terms of physically, genetically, that some ET races might find us a delicacy on their menu. But on the other hand, our loosh energy is kind of like wool, pure wool for them. If you can understand the analogy, how that operates, it's just like they can utilize that for their purposes. So, and I think it's important to understand that, so it's a commodity. It's like you can sell loosh energy. It's like, imagine a kind of a galactic Wall Street in some kind of reptilian world where you're selling loosh energy, pure loosh energy from humans in fear or whatever it is. So yeah, it's a commodity.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, what you're seeing on the timeline, at least what I've been experiencing on the timeline, is watching all this drama take place, and there is a lot of what I call negative energy, and it seems to me like that's happening on a mass scale to such an extent that what you're describing sounds like maybe somebody's getting a big belly off of that, because there's a lot of negativity going on right now. And what I also see is as a lot of ascended beings who are very spiritually evolved are almost living in a different world simultaneously. So you have a collision between those of us who are really ascended in consciousness, who hold a higher vibration, and then those who are experiencing and down nosediving into conflict. So, and then of course you have these perpetrators, which seem like they're creating and orchestrating this conflict, like you were describing, in order to keep everybody locked into this false matrix or frequency fence design work. So I guess it's by design to some degree.
Yeah, I think the matrix is another way of encapsulating exactly how this works. The people that are kind of asleep, they live in this false matrix world, and their energy is secretly sustaining this kind of artificial intelligence. Well, I think in our world, the reality is that the collective consciousness of humanity is being siphoned off to basically benefit certain extraterrestrial groups that rely on that kind of loosh energy. For those individuals that are kind of more awake, we are trying to break the collective away from that. So you and I and your listeners, I'm sure, are very familiar with the problems we all face in trying to explain family members or friends or our work colleagues the truth of some of this kind of information that we know to be true. That people are so deeply enmeshed in the matrix that they don't believe that this kind of thing can be going on. And so so it's almost like we are part of this war. We are on the side of trying to awaken people to what's really been happening and how they're being manipulated, and how collective consciousness is being used and directed in a way that just keeps us enslaved. And there are those in the secret societies or the elites that are trying to manipulate us to kind of harness the power of collective consciousness for their own long-term goals.
It seems to me like such a violation of free will when they're doing that. So I'd like to see the end game turn around to a point where everybody gets to ascend to a higher frequency and decide where they want to navigate in the space-time continuum without actually dying in the illusion of, just by actually going and traveling through consciousness or phase shifting or however they choose to get there. But I think that's the ideal behind what we really want to be as star people, in my opinion.
Well, that's the ideal, and up until recently, it's been a very gradual process of awakening. There are more and more people that are now questioning what's really going on, but by and large, the great majority of humanity are still enmeshed in basic survival kind of issues, and they're not aware of these kinds of broader galactic questions or broader control issues that are happening at a planetary level. For some people, just kind of economic survival is where most of their interest is, or their attention is. And we know, sadly, in the United States, how now the American middle class has been kind of decimated. And what once used to be a kind of very affluent middle class, probably the most affluent middle class on the planet, has shrunk quite a bit, and now people are basically struggling with these low service, minimum wage jobs, and that's terrible, because now their consciousness, the anxiety that they experience in not having a kind of high paying job and being trapped in one of these kind of service industry jobs where you're getting minimum wage or maybe a little bit more, you're now trapped in that, and trying to awaken people out of that is a very difficult and challenging task.
Mm-hmm.
But there seems to be some kind of game changer happening now, which is very interesting, and that's certainly what Corey Goode and the whole kind of Ra material, Law of One material talked about.
And what is the game changer? Is that something coming from the Galactic Center, or is that the more of the Ascension process, or what?
I think it's more of some kind of people talk about a region of the galaxy that our solar system and the adjoining solar systems are entering, which is essentially raising the vibration of the entire region of this galaxy.
Right.
And so people have given it many different names, but essentially it's a kind of higher frequency belt that we are entering into, and we will be crossing through that belt for I don't know how many years exactly. People have different estimates, but certainly as we start going through that, and we're probably seeing that now, the frequencies get heightened, and people are able to kind of manifest more quickly, more powerfully. And so and it's like we have to be educated to make the right choices, because if our powers of manifestation are becoming sharper and more powerful and more developed, we have to be very careful that we don't manifest a nightmare for ourselves, that we want to manifest, abundance and grace and peace and all of those wonderful things, rather than kind of struggle, survival, and war.
Right.
And we're seeing around the planet, we are seeing kind of like this bifurcation, if you like, where there are certain parts of the planet that are really descending into just outright war. And of course, we have these massive refugee problems. But there are other parts of the planet which are experiencing abundance and affluence. And of course, you're having a clash. It's not so much a clash of civilization, but it's almost like collective groups of people who are able to manifest better society. Say, like in Europe, you have northern European countries where, for people who come from these war-torn places in the Middle East, they go into a place like Germany or Norway or Denmark. It's like going from hell to heaven for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're seeing that, and I think it's really a question of this being something that we collectively appreciate more as something that we can take control over through our consciousness, through making the right choices, so that we can experience what we truly desire, rather than be locked into one or the other.
I agree with you on that one. Where I come from, we call it the photon shift. When I was talking about ascension and DNA activation, it's very similar to that, but some people call it a galactic wave too. But yes, definitely higher frequencies descending onto the world and changing everything. And from what I understand, it's changing everything on a multiversal scale, which means all planets and civilizations expand to higher levels of consciousness simultaneously, instantaneously. So it's quite powerful. And that's what's so amazing to me when you know that kind of frequencies descending into this world and onto it, activating our DNA and enlightening us. And then you have these opposing forces it's almost like they're jealous. They don't want us to ascend. They don't want us to go to that next level. So I do see that splitting apart at some level. It's got to split, to some degree. They talk about oratronic versus a full light universe. They talk about the incomplete and a spin-off and a breakaway insofar as planets, maybe even this world, breaking off and becoming two different worlds. What is your impression of that? Do you see anything like that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's exactly what is happening. As more and more people awaken and kind of like change their consciousness so that they are not in a place where they are manifesting energies of anxiety, stress, fear, but are in a place where they're manifesting more blissful states or more abundance, or being able to create abundance for themselves out of difficult situations. As more and more people do that, then what happens is that the collective consciousness begins to change. Because now, the thing is that, even though on the one hand, the middle class has been shattered in the United States and people have been kind of forced into these low-paying jobs from what were previously higher-paying jobs in the manufacturing industry, what's happening is that a lot of people are now going back into kind of like organic farming or into kind of like doing creative things, because now there's not the job security that there once was, and so people are now relying more and more on their creative abilities, and they're finding that they're able to survive, that they're able to thrive. And so you have like this growth in organic kind of farming. You have a growth in terms of like these internet businesses, and like in my case, for example, I left a career as a university professor where I was given a salary and there was a lot of security there, but I was trapped. As long as I accepted that paycheck month to month, then I was trapped in a certain way of thinking where I was controlled by the system. And it took a certain amount of courage on my, I have to say it, but it took a certain amount of courage to kind of break free of that and to take up this kind of like, like exotic effort to kind of like pursue exopolitics and make a living from it. And it definitely was a real struggle for quite some time. But now I'm finding that it's becoming a lot easier because people are now appreciating that exopolitics is very real and very important. So what was once a real struggle is now something that is providing or sustaining me in terms of like the sales of books and lectures and speaking tours and so forth.
Exactly. Well, the universe accommodates our picture of reality. There's no doubt about that. And of course, you're on a beautiful island, and I think that it supports you on a higher consciousness level. That's just my own take, because I lived on Maui, and I know how the energy flows over there. So I think you're a blessing, by the way. It's been an honor to interview you tonight. I just really appreciating you being here with us. It's fascinating. And I did want to point out here, looks like my producer put in a little thing that says the Fourth Reich is here. It's an article if you want to check it out later. So yeah, once again, there's a little sign there, but once again, as we rise to higher levels of spirituality and trust what I call source, trust your higher self and the multiverse to allow good things to come into your life, and we can break away all these chains that they've tried to hold on to us. And to me, these people, even with the Fourth Reich, they're an after image. They're almost like an afterthought. They're not really in sync with what I call the multiverse. What is your impression of that?
Oh yeah, they're definitely not in sync with the multiverse, because their whole modus vivendi has always been about control and power and manipulating others, and that means that they're not able to harness this energy from source or from these higher planes of consciousness. They're not able to harness it themselves directly because they've closed their heart chakra, that their connection to that source energy is closed. So they kind of have to rely on those around them who are connected to source energy to be able to kind of get that emotional hit or to get that energy kind of upgrade. But as people around them, as people begin to ascend themselves, then the elite lose their control more and more. So it's always these circles, because the elite like to surround themselves with talented, creative people that are connected to source and manipulate them. But as these people wake up and break free of the elite, then the elite are denied the very thing that they've been relying on. And so now they're faced with the question of, well, our old methods of control and manipulation are failing. What do we do now? And they're kind of being faced with their own kind of challenge, which is to themselves start to open up and connect with the source, because some of the elites do it. And the ones that do it then go to the other ones and start to tell them, look, it's not so bad, do it. You can experience really a wonderful transition, even though there is, that kind of karmic challenge at the beginning. But in the end, they say it's worth it. So, yeah, even the elites can change for the better.
Mm-hmm. I would think they would just get it by osmosis alone, just by people in the resonance wave of higher consciousness would eventually get it. But it seems like it's been a really slow-moving tide when it comes down to some of these people in these elite. The illusion of elite. I was going to ask you very quickly to get back to the moon for a second here. There's theories that the moon was towed in at some point in the continuum, or that it was under intelligent control itself. What is your impression of that? And also that it came from Orion. Do you have any information on that?
I'm not sure where it came from, but I think it definitely hasn't been there for a long time, because there are many different cultures that refer to a time before the moon. So even in our kind of recorded history, the ancient Greeks or the Indians and South Americans, various cultures talked about a time before the moon. So whether we go back, I think if we went back about 12,000 years to the fall of Atlantis, we'd probably find that during the time of Atlantis, there wasn't a moon, or maybe around that time when Atlantis finally collapsed, because I know there was a transition over many thousands of years for Atlantis, that at some point the moon came in, and it's been there ever since. And I think it was put there basically as a mechanism of control and manipulation by the insectoid and the reptilians.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I call it a monitoring station.
Exactly.
Yeah, I used to really like the moon, and nowadays I look at it a little bit differently, but it's still very beautiful at night, and especially during a full moon. I was going to ask you about the giants. Do they fit in at all to extraterrestrials?
Yes, definitely. I think there is something about consciousness, something in terms of as we become more aligned with source energy, our genetics change, our physical appearance changes, and so that we can grow. Grundville Melchizedek, his book The Flower of Life, kind of described how our physical bodies can transition, or will transition, as we ascend, so that whatever we are now, as we move into that higher state of consciousness, our DNA changes, our physical body changes, and we grow taller and taller. So essentially, the legends of the giants, I think that those legends are based on these ancient golden ages where people were experiencing higher states of consciousness, and because of that, they were physically much taller. And with the fall in consciousness, people literally kind of shrank in size. And I think we are now at the kind of bottom of that kind of historical evolution, and now we are moving upwards again. And I think that a result of that is that our physical bodies are going to begin to change as our consciousness begins to kind of influence our DNA.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And then what comes to mind also is the GMOs and everything that's being engineered on our behalf to almost shut down and switch off DNA to some degree. So I find that interesting, that there's kind of a challenge there when it comes to, of course, it's a choice to have organics, but it seems like there's a push for kind of an artificial manipulation associated with our diets.
Well, that's right. But, it's very heartening to know that a company like Monsanto, which has really been behind this genetic modified food process, I mean, it's been taking really severe hits. I think its workforce is now being reduced by as much as 30%. It's, the enormous capital it once had is shrinking. Its Wall Street value is shrinking. So, there's a kind of very powerful sign that this effort to kind of create genetically modified humans through food and enabling humanity to be kind of manipulated in that sense is failing, and people are going back to organics and back to kind of like believing in influencing what their ingesting through their consciousness. Because when with organic farming, you have this relationship between the farmer and the food, which is very nurturing and strengthening, so that when we eat organically created food, it's not that we're just eating things which is genetically pure. It also has the consciousness of the farmer, who is much more connected with that food, as opposed to these kind of mass manufactured farms run by Monsanto and others, where there's this disconnect between the people that are processing all of that food and the food itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And even blessing your food, as we all know, raises the vibration of the food. And even if it was quote unquote engineered in something, to some degree, we could bless it and change the frequency and vibration, I would suspect. So.
Exactly. Yeah, I always do that. I just do a mental blessing for my food all the time. It's a very simple thing to do, but when you do that, you're in that process of basically allowing higher energies to come into your food, and then through your food into you.
Spiritual lifestyle. That's what it boils down to, just state of consciousness. Nice consciousness flow. That's what we all need here. I'm also going to ask you about the, in 1958, you referenced I think it was 7 flying saucers that were in S4, and I was wondering if you can elaborate on those a little bit.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, there are a number of whistleblowers that have talked about going into the S4 facility. This one whistleblower, he used the pseudonym Cooper. He went into the S4 facility as part of a CIA delegation that was under orders from President Eisenhower to find out what was happening at the S4 facility, because Eisenhower had given great power to the Majestic 12 Committee to kind of run the extraterrestrial projects as they saw fit, but definitely wanted to maintain the chain of command. He wanted to be briefed on what was going on so that he could make the decisions as to what would eventually be happening there. But he was cut out of the loop, and so Eisenhower had to threaten to use the First Army that was based in Colorado at the time to invade Area 51 and the S4 facility. So he got this CIA delegation to go in there. They saw a number of flying saucers. They saw some ETs. They had a meeting with the ETs there, and they went and had a briefing with Eisenhower to tell him about what they'd seen. But the important thing there was that the whistleblower said that in the S4 facility, he described 7. He saw 7 flying saucers. 4 of them were from Germany. 3 were extraterrestrial. So that gives you an idea about the kind of advances that happened under Nazi Germany and the German secret societies, that the US was still playing catch up as late as 1958.
And I find that very fascinating. Did he ever describe what kind of metals were used in the craft or the building of the craft?
No, he didn't. He just basically looked at the craft from a hallway. In terms of being able to get that information, Bob Lazar was very much involved in that kind of hands-on experience with the craft. But Cooper, back in 1958, he just basically saw these things on the tour of the S4 facility. He didn't get to work with the craft themselves or have hands-on contact with those. So you have to go to Bob Lazar for that.
Yeah, that's fascinating information. Do you think they're still doing similar research and investigations at S4, or do you think things have slowed down a little bit over there?
Well, I think S4 is like a secret space program museum. It's where the original Vril and extraterrestrial craft went. That became the basis for the reverse engineering of the secret space programs that were built by various corporations. There's a new whistleblower who's recently come forward. He wrote a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials. His name is William Tompkins, and he talks about his involvement in the manufacturing in the design and the manufacturing of the secret space programs, of the space carriers and the space battle cruisers that were built for the U.S. Navy. So in the 50s, the U.S. was able to reverse engineer some of the flying saucers that they had at S4, but the Navy was not interested in small flying saucers This was just a stepping stone into building space cruisers and space carriers that would basically be the host for the smaller flying saucers that were inside of S4. So to build those space cruisers, you had to work with the major corporations, aerospace corporations. So, all corporations like Lockheed, like Northrop Grumman, like Douglas, Boeing, TRW, and so forth. That all of these corporations at the time were behind this secret effort by the US Navy to develop secret space programs, space cruisers and space carriers that would be used. Mm-hmm. And this all happened. This all happened in these things were all built in Utah, Dugway Proving Grounds out there. This is where they have built and deployed their secret space program battle fleets.
That's amazing. And how many years ahead? We're talking probably, I would say, at least 80 years. I mean, how far ahead are they? And at what point, I mean, are they, how far out in the universe are they, I guess is my question. As far as how much or how far can they travel?
Well, we have different waves of space programs, because first there was the secret societies, the German secret societies and the Nazi SS that developed the first space programs, kind of like in our modern era, back in the 1930s and 40s. I mean, this is incredible that the Nazis were flying missions to the moon and Mars in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. And of course, NASA and the Navy sent the first rocket ship to the moon in 1969. The first rockets to the moon in 69. But as far as Mars is concerned, that had to wait for a little bit later, and we still haven't had manned missions to Mars as far as we know. So so there's a big lag in terms of what the Germans had achieved, secret space programs have achieved. And also there's a lag between what we know in the open source literature in our world, the white world as it's called, and the black world, the classified world, where they do have anti-gravity technologies, where they do have teleportation technologies, where they do have time travel technologies. These are all used in the black world. So they've reached this level of development with that. But they're still playing catch up to what the Nazis had achieved and the German secret societies had achieved. And of course, we in the general public don't know any of this.
Right. That's so unfortunate. I'm just wondering how much universal access they have. It seems like they've made so many breakthroughs with technology, yet there has to be a level of evolution in consciousness to allow them more access to the multiverse. And I guess my question would have been, at what point did they get stopped by another species in their travels through space?
Well, that's a fascinating question, Solaris. A really interesting one. I think that it's not a black and white picture. A lot of people often assume that, okay, you got bad guys, these reptilians, these draconians who go out there and do these terrible things, conquest. I think the way they do it is more along the lines of kind of like subversion and infiltration, establishing a presence, and kind of like going in to protect your people. So if, for example, the reptilians establish a kind of genetic presence on a world, and then that genetic presence is kind of threatened in some way by the kind of indigenous groups, then they have a right to defend themselves. And so I think this is the way in which the reptilians, the draconians, have been able to establish a kind of galactic empire. That they do it through infiltration. They do it by kind of seeding their groups, their people on the planet. And then if their people are threatened in some way, then they have the right to defend them. So in that way, it's for the reptilians. I mean, even though we can regard them as basically galactic conquerors, they really see themselves as protectors. They see themselves as fighting a just war, an ethical war. So this is what we need to kind of keep in mind. Just as the United States believes it's conducting a just war in intervening in these conflicts, such as Libya or Iraq, where they go in there and say, we're going to help an oppressed people and we're going to give them military support and so forth, so that you can kind of like frame your military intervention in terms of these just war principles. But anyone looking at the big picture can understand that this is a war of conquest. But still, it's done in a way that it's not black and white.
Right. That's a good answer right there. Well, it seems to me like the starseeds are under attack, at least from what I've seen here with all the conflict that's going on. It seems like a lot of people are being persecuted. I don't want to be color-coded, but to some degree I see a lot of whites being targeted too. And I wonder how much of the starseeds are getting attacked, and I'm wondering at what point is there intervention, or what I would call divine intervention. Even though we're empowering ourselves, it would be nice to have a quote-unquote universal celestial backup insofar as if we are under attack here and we are being persecuted, that there should be some intervention on behalf of the off-world species?
Well, I don't know how much we really want that intervention of the off-world species at this stage, because in a way we've already seen great changes in terms of the ability of light workers to manifest better conditions for themselves and awakening others around them. That it's a kind of incremental effort, but we're seeing the changes already of that. Because there are many light workers that have been able to establish successful industries. A good example is like Gayam TV with you have like a whole kind of a grassroots television network which is putting out these positive, transformative messages and shows that is kind of spreading. And when we see that with the internet, like the number of alternative news sites and news programs like yours is a good example. 20 years ago, there's no way in the world you probably could have had a radio program if you weren't going to basically follow a radio network's dictates in terms of how you conduct a show and what you do. But now it's much easier to create your own radio shows and kind of get remuneration in some way if you're popular, and you get lots of listeners, or you get lots of video hits on YouTube, or you get lots of visitors to your website that you can actually now support yourself in that way. So I think we're seeing a transition. And even though it is hard, and I certainly would love for benevolent ETs to kind of show up and all of a sudden there it is, the secrecy is over. In a way, I understand the wisdom of why they've been holding back and why they've been kind of helping us behind the scenes and basically saying, no, you can do it yourselves. We're just going to help you from behind the scenes, but you can free the planet through the raising of consciousness and through your own efforts to kind of awaken your brothers and sisters.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a nice response. I've heard through the grapevine and the illusion of that the CIA was overseeing operations at Area 51S4, and that somehow the military has been disempowered over there. Now, I don't know if this is even close to being accurate, but from what I understand, the source of the person has some kind of an access. Do you know anything about that, or are you familiar with that?
Yes, definitely. The CIA, from the very beginning of the establishment of Area 51, ran the security of the base. It was not something that was in control of the military. And that suited the MJ-12 group, because the CIA, they could control quite easily, because the CIA is a civilian organization. It was established relatively recently, 1947, with the express goal of raising the funding for these black programs. And so the CIA from the very beginning has been involved in all kinds of nefarious fundraising activities, and the people running the CIA understood that this was an organization that could be successfully used to kind of like manipulate society and hide these secret programs. The military, the big difference there is that the military, all the officers in the military, they swear allegiance to the Constitution, and so they still do believe in the Constitution. And the military has a heritage going back hundreds of years to the founding of the American Republic. And so the people involved in these senior positions in the U.S. military believe that they're protecting the Republic, protecting military traditions, protecting the Constitution. So that can only be pushed so far, which is why they were kind of like pushed out of control in terms of CIA-run operations at Area 51 and S4, which is why Eisenhower had to threaten the Majestic 12 group that he would invade Area 51 to kind of put it back under presidential military control. He didn't succeed, or quite clearly, what he did achieve was just a stopgap, because what happened with the assassination of President Kennedy was very clearly a coup by the Fourth Reich. Essentially, that's when the American Republic ceased to exist, and we woke up after Kennedy was killed in the Fourth Reich.
It's really interesting. So literally, the CIA has been overseeing the operations there since, and they're still doing that?
They are still doing that. That's correct,
okay.
Yes. The CIA has been working very closely with the Nazi SS, who relocated in the Americas, in Antarctica, and also through Operation Paperclip. And so the Nazi SS, the CIA, Majestic 12 have been working very closely together to create this Fourth Reich.
It's really interesting. So the name, the military-industrial complex, is that kind of obsolete now, or do they still go by that name?
Well, that was the term President Eisenhower used to refer to what he recognized as this kind of Fourth Reich that was basically taking shape. The thing with Eisenhower, as I mentioned, was that he still had a lot of power. I mean, there was a struggle, a clear struggle between the Republican constitutional form of government and this kind of Fourth Reich looming behind the scenes. And Eisenhower was able to kind of keep the American Republic alive until his kind of resignation, and then unfortunately with Kennedy in 1960, that's when the military-industrial complex succeeded, and you had the Fourth Reich kind of subverting the whole thing. So in a way, what's happened is that the military has been infiltrated and subverted through this military-industrial complex. Not totally, not completely, which is why after the Kennedy assassination, even though the military kind of didn't stage a coup, because it was very clear who did this. The Majestic 12 basically took it over, and that was a time when the military could have staged a coup and exposed all the people behind the Kennedy assassination, but they chose not to do that because they recognized that there probably would have been a civil war. But now the American military have been behind a lot of the disclosures, a lot of these whistleblowers coming forward, revealing the truth, and more whistleblowers are coming forward every day, revealing what's really been going on. And I think that the American military are hoping that through this process, more and more of the American and world public can awaken to the truth, to this Fourth Reich. So I wouldn't say the military-industrial complex is obsolete. It's really become a kind of extension of the Fourth Reich. But the U.S. military is really breaking free of that.
That's good to know. Well, when you think of the Fourth Reich, I just don't see positive things when I think of the Fourth Reich. Unfortunately, I think of oppression and manipulation and mind control and a lot of other things. And in question of Majestic 12, many people have said Majestic 12 wasn't really a real organization, but it actually was a real group of people, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, this was appointed by President Truman, and then Eisenhower gave them more power in running these projects, because I think Truman and Eisenhower both understood that you need to have a control group set up to look after these black projects involving extraterrestrial civilizations, advanced technologies, secret space programs, that this had to be insulated from the kind of conventional political process, where basically you politicians in the United States, it's hard for them to go beyond the 2-year election cycle, because that's all they think about, being re-elected. And so, that's how they think, and that can be easily manipulated. So there was good reason to set up a committee of officials that are appointed who are outside of the conventional political process, making the key decisions as to how these projects would be run. What Eisenhower had in mind was that essentially that this committee, Majestic 12, would still report to the president, to the office of the president. So there would be accountability in that way. But what Eisenhower didn't count on was that he would be cut out of the loop. and that's why he made his famous farewell speech in 1961. Beware the power of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah. Forewarned is forearmed. There's no doubt about that one. So in essence, who really runs the secret space program? We can say the CIA oversees a lot of it, but behind it all, the real puppet masters, who are they?
There's multiple secret space programs. This is the thing. In my book, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Program, I basically go into 5 different secret space programs in terms of the different groups are involved. The first one is a space program that's run by the Nazis and the German secret societies that began collaborating with the reptilian extraterrestrials. The second space program is a program that was run by the U.S. Navy. It's called Solar Warden. That's a kind of more constitutional form of a space program being run. The third program is called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, and this is a program that was set up with Majestic 12 or by Majestic 12, where the industrial elite basically hoarded the best space technologies that were being built by the corporations for the US Navy's Solar Warden, and they siphoned off the best technologies and eventually built a parallel program that's called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, and that's run by Majestic 12 and the power elite in the United States, Britain, and other countries. Then there's a fourth space program which is run by the United Nations. This program operates largely outside of our solar system, basically trying to develop advanced technologies through agreements with other civilizations for defensive purposes against common enemies. So it's kind of like closer to the Star Trek model of a secret space program. And the fifth program is really a kind of all these special access programs that are all unacknowledged, that all kind of happen off the books, that are really essentially rogue operations that really serve their own interests. So this is kind of like a rubric for many different corporate, military-run special access programs that really are rogue operations.
And how does the Vatican correlate or connect into the secret space program, if at all?
The Vatican's been very heavily involved in a number of these programs. They were involved really in many of them because the Vatican has within it its own secret societies, and they cooperated with the Germans, with the Nazi SS that were fleeing Europe, and the Vatican was very helpful to the Nazis in helping relocate them to South America, helping them infiltrate other countries. So the Vatican has been heavily involved in all of these programs that I just named. I don't think there's an exception to any of those. So the Vatican, and the thing to keep in mind is that the Vatican has the world's most extensive intelligence service. So it was natural for the Vatican to be involved in this because the Vatican goes back nearly 2,000 years. It has had a functioning intelligence service going back to the time of the Inquisition, and it has an incredible library, which is unique. It's the most secret library where they have information and intelligence on secret Earth civilizations or inner Earth civilizations that go back thousands of years. So yeah, the Vatican is heavily involved in all of this.
Yeah, I'd like to check out their catacombs, go through those ancient artifacts and archives and everything else they have down there. It's quite interesting. And of course, there's the Jesuits too. Yeah, that's there's a lot of history there in the illusion of. There's no doubt. We're getting ready to wrap this up in about 10 minutes, plus or minus. I can't believe it. Michael, it's gone by so quickly, but it's been such an honor to interview you tonight. And I did want to ask you, what's the best way to purchase your books for the listeners, and how can they contact you?
My website, exopolitics.org, they can go there and they can contact me. I have a Facebook page and email. I'm very accessible by email. That's probably the best way there. Or they can go to Amazon. That's how most people get my books. And just type in my name, Michael Salla, and you'll see the list of my publications, and you can get the books there.
Excellent. Are you doing any lectures soon?
Yes, I'm going to be going off to the Rumford group. They're doing a big symposium up there in Yelm on February 23rd. I'll be up there doing a lecture. So I think you need to be a part. You need to do one of their courses to be involved in that. But I'm doing a lecture there, and also involved in having some books translated into other foreign languages.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So what actually guided you to go to the Hawaiian Islands?
Well, it just so happened that I was my career or my position in Washington D.C. came to a close. The university I had a position at when I had a feature article published in the Washington Post, rather than having my back slapped and said, rather than, being kind of like congratulated on that, I was actually punished for that because they said that associating the university with extraterrestrial research somehow demeaned the university, and so my position was terminated, and so I was essentially on my way back to Australia after that happened, and this was. My position was being terminated in August of 2004. And in August of 2004, I traveled to the Hawaiian Islands to attend a seminar with Joan Ocean and met my future wife. And that was just an incredible transition. She was living in Hawaii. And so I was taken out of a very unpleasant situation and put into the Hawaiian Islands. So I think in the end, the universe was looking after me.
Oh, I think so too. Was it Madame Pele takes care of... the Hawaiians, there's no doubt about that. That's quite interesting. Well, what a blessing in disguise that was. And I can't believe they gave you such a hard time about that. Oh, gosh. At the university.
Oh, yeah, no, it was very serious. I mean, very traumatic, going from a university career and salaries and payments and visas and all of that to suddenly being out of a job, doing something that no university wanted to be associated with. That was very challenging. It's definitely, I had to live on the bleeding edge for quite a while there.
It's interesting how far everybody's come, though, since 2004. Think about it. It's amazing how much progress has been made in the UFO, ufology field and in extraterrestrials in general. I don't think people are scoffing anymore like they used to be.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, especially now with the secret space programs, as that element is coming forward, as more credible whistleblowers are coming forward, revealing their involvement with that all of a sudden people that for years have been kind of like sitting on the fence and thinking that all of this was just kind of like some kind of massive psyop or disinformation, are now getting on board and realizing that, hey, I've got to play catch up here, that this is real, and I've got to start reading this material.
Why do you think some of these people took so long to come forward about what they knew? Were they being threatened, or what happened?
I think for the major part, it's been a very clever control system. Psychological warfare is being used here, and the kind of the best thing or the easiest thing they did to kind of like make this something that the professional class would avoid would be that you would lose your career if you started writing about this or started taking this subject seriously. You'd lose your career. I went through that. That's exactly what happened to me. I lost my career because I took this field seriously, and all of my peers said that this was not something that had a place within in a university. That was the expression that was actually used in my dismissal letter. It was like, your new area of research has no place in our university. But that's changed. Now people are realizing that you can talk about this within universities because a lot of the major institutions are now talking about extraterrestrial life, exoplanets. And that's kind of legitimated discussion of extraterrestrial life within universities, within think tanks. Before exoplanets were being discovered by NASA, any academic could be punished for talking about extraterrestrial life. Now it's like, yes, you've got to talk about it because everyone else is talking about it.
Right. Well, they need to get on the fast track and start catching up. Now they're going to be left in the dust. It's unfortunate because when you think about the universities, they're supposed to be so educated, and at the same time, first of all, most of the data is censored. So a lot of the things that people get exposed to, as far as information goes, is edited and censored, and half of it's probably not even, a correct assessment of what's happened on a historical level to our world.
Yes, there's an expression Michael Creamer uses, which is called knowledge filtration. It's basically what's used in the universities. It's the elites control the senior positions in universities, and so there are certain areas that are taboo. Like discussing extraterrestrial life, discussing new energies, discussing kind of holographic healing technologies. There are certain areas that are taboo, and if you're an academic, as long as you don't touch those areas, then you can have a successful career, publish books, get tenure, and do very well. As soon as you touch these areas, then you get punished. And but these are very bright people, and and I don't condemn a person who chooses to kind of dismiss the reality of these things because they value their tenure, they want to feed their kids and want to feed their families. I understand they like their six-figure salaries and they like the status that comes with that. But eventually, these are smart people. And when they realize that they've been hoodwinked, I think they're going to be very, very angry. And then the student body is going to be very, very angry for having also being fooled for so long. So I think that what's going to happen is you're going to find when we kind of break a certain critical mass, the universities are going to come on board and they're going to be the biggest supporters of the disclosure movement.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like they're going to have to revamp their schools and create mystery schools or something along those lines to some degree. It's interesting because, ever since I was young, I've always been into higher consciousness and soul evolution. And it seems like we always know. We have cellular memory and recall about consciousness, frequency, how sound can heal and things like that. All these natural abilities which get kind of hidden and cloaked due to programming, of course, at a young age, and then of course in the colleges. So I'd like to see that turn around for sure.
I think you'll see it, sooner than later.
Well, that's great. And then if we can just kind of, roll out the 0-point travel or free energy, that would be awesome too, wouldn't you say?
Oh, I'd love to be able to go from the Big Island to Maui on my hovercraft car. I mean, I'm looking forward to that, and I think that'll be a revolution. Once they start releasing these free energy technologies, and we are able to, or car industry changes and starts producing hovercraft cars and so forth, then life will not be the same, because once we're able to transport ourselves quickly and easily across large distances, then the kind of the matrix of information and sharing and interconnectedness, that's going to just kind of go through quantum steps.
Right. What comes to mind is phase shifting once again and teleportation. I think that would be awesome. We could start, like in Star Trek, you just teleport somewhere or beam somebody to one location from point A to point B. And of course, I think oil is becoming obsolete anyways, which, I think it's just a matter of time before that just goes right into null.
Yeah, well, the teleportation is a good example. That's based on the principle of quantum entanglement. There's a kind of unity between the destination and the departure point. There's some unity there, and that enables the teleportation to occur through technological devices. But teleportation is also able to be achieved through consciousness. That if you're able to merge your consciousness in terms of some destination, in terms of like being able to perfectly envisage the destination where you want to go, then you can teleport yourself consciously. So the two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Consciousness and motion, once again. Well, that's the fabric of space and time, isn't it? Because there's really no such thing as time. It's a benchmark of measure, and there's no real thing as space. It doesn't really exist, technically speaking. So literally, we can go from point A to point B through intent, through consciousness and motion, from what you're describing.
Exactly, yeah. Time is an illusion. It's a very clever illusion, and we buy into it. But ultimately, that's exactly right. That we, through our power of consciousness, we can move through space and time, and find that yes, all of these kind of conceptions we have of time are illusory.
Mm-hmm. Even death, to me, I think the transition of death is an imaginary, well, I wouldn't say imaginary, but to some degree it seems like it's just a gravity well of programming. In other words, if we break out of that cycle through light body and higher consciousness, I believe we could live to be at least over, I guess, about 800 to 1,000 years old if our DNA was altered to that higher level.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, death is also one of those illusions. It's our physical body really is a skin suit. I mean, it really is. It's just a suit our light body, our soul matrix puts on, so that we can experience physical life. And then at a certain time, when that skin suit, the use by date is reached, then we shed it, and our light body just kind of goes on to the next plane.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I like that. And with that being said, I think we're just about out of time here. Michael, I want to thank you once again for joining us. It's been incredible to have you on, an honor, and I hope to have you back again. And many blessings to you over there on the Hawaiian Islands. Beautiful. Thank my producer, too. Thank you very much for producing me tonight. Thank everybody for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this show tonight. And have a great week. I think we're about ready to roll out of here, right? Or did I jump that gun?
You're right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.